Sorry, y'all. Forgot Screencast-O-Matic is only 15 minutes per recording. So let's look at supply. When she said, we peek in the supply closet. And let's look to see how we coded that. It was an error. And if we look here, you can see I marked it as using visual information only. And the reason why is because supply closet does not make sense. And supply closet isn't the way the English sounds. Quick caveat, the structure column typically is not something that I'm as concerned about unless I'm working with a student where English is their second language. That's where you're going to see structure come out a lot more because they're still learning how English is supposed to sound. So, if you don't see a lot within the structure column, or then you do, I'm not as concerned about that unless a child is an emergent bilingual kiddo. Because typically kids who are native English speakers, if they use what makes sense, it's going to sound right too in the English language. And if they don't use what makes sense, it's not going to sound right in the English language either. There are a couple of cases where it does, but just keeping that in mind. All right, so with supply closet, I just put she was visual only. That's all she used. Let's look at the next error, the next miscue, color red. So this was an interesting miscue because you can kind of see where her brain was going, right? Color red paper. If you actually see this book, you can see later on how Maria chose a red napkin. So there is, a piece in there where maybe red was kind of like, oh, okay, like that might be it, because you can see the color red. But if you look at the picture, there's lots of colors. So visually, that's all she used there. To say color red paper doesn't quite make sense and isn't quite structurally making sense either, or sounding right. Again, chose for chooses. She used middle visual as much as she could, but couldn't get that ooh sound. And then again, I don't want to make a flat, or I'm sorry, the said versus says. So for this, she said makes sense. It sounds structurally correct. And she used a little bit of visual. She used the S at the beginning, but she didn't follow all the way through to the end. She used the beginning, but not all the way through to the end. And then that was our last miscue. So you'll see I even noted that at the bottom. Uses visual first. And that is something that's important because if she's using visual first, as a reader, she's thinking that's the most important information I need to use first and foremost. And that's what we don't want. We want kids to be thinking about what's going to make sense, what sounds right within the English language, and then the visual supports that. Like, oh yeah, and that does look right too. Now all those come together. But the problem we get with kids who are print dependent first is that they lose all that meaning of that sentence and it's just gone. And at that point, all they're doing is saying sounds. And that's a hard habit to break. So for this child, if we're thinking about those 5 structures that we looked at, the 5 different ways that kiddos can process, this child would be a print dependent reader, either print dependent, or you could say at some points she has skill in print and some skill in meaning, but she's not integrating them yet. Because she did say chose instead of choose. It does make sense, and it does have some visual. They're just not coming together yet. So instructional choices for this child, I would move first and foremost to, is what you're saying making sense? And are you fixing it when it doesn't make sense? Because if a child can hear, oh, that didn't make sense, then going back, and rereading is your next step. So if I say supply closet, that doesn't make sense. That's not a real word. Let me go back and reread that and try something else. So that can be one point of instruction. Another point of instruction is just fixing mistakes. And that just means she's going to need to attend a bit more closely. That if there's 2 O's there, that's ooh. Now try it. Choose. If I see the word S-A-Y-S, I have to go all the way through that word. I just need to make sure I'm fixing my mistakes when I make them. And so those would be 2 points of instruction for this child. So take your writing record or reading record, compare it to mine, and let's see how this continues to go as we continue to do miscue analysis, reading records, and running records. And again, this is all building towards thinking about kiddos when we group them. If I've got a child like this child who's struggling with connecting visual and meaning, and she's not self-correcting when she makes errors, she's just plowing through. Then when she's in a group with kiddos, I want her to be in a group with kiddos who might be struggling with the same thing. Or that might be a mini lesson that I teach that small group of kiddos. So again, all of this is just data informing our instruction for these children. All right. Thanks. I'll see you next time.